I was in labor during a visit to the cemetery when my husband coldly said, "Why don't you just give birth here?" He then forcibly took my cell phone and drove away in the car. The temperature that day was over 105 degrees Fahrenheit. I was left stranded in a remote graveyard with no way to call for help, pushed to the brink of despair. I couldn't understand why my husband would do such a terrible thing. As I was overwhelmed by pain and fear, I suddenly realized something. My name is Taylor. I'm a 33-year-old housewife. We're in our 3rd year of marriage, but early on, I had envisioned a hopeful future with my husband, Niall. On weekends, we used to go shopping together, cook, watch movies, and spend peaceful time together. I felt genuine love and trust for my husband, believing that our vowed love would last forever. However, that illusion was shattered when I became pregnant. For some reason, my husband, who had been affectionate before, suddenly turned cold. He started helping less with housework, and when I tried to talk to him, Niall would coldly say, "I'm tired from work, don't talk to me." I was confused by his attitude, and my anxiety grew day by day. When I asked him why, he shouted, "Pregnancy isn't an illness. Don't be lazy and do things properly by yourself." Since then, he stopped caring about my health or feelings entirely. Even so, I tried to mend our relationship. I thought maybe it was because he said he was tired from work. Or perhaps he was just overwhelmed by the sudden reality of becoming a father. Believing this, I made an effort to prepare meals every day and do as much housework as possible, even when morning sickness was severe. But every time I saw Niall's irritated glare, I felt the image of his former kind self slipping further away. As these days continued, the baby in my belly grew steadily, and that was my only support. "We'll meet soon. I love you so much," I would always say, caressing my growing belly. But even when I gradually started preparing baby items, my husband would still click his tongue in disapproval, and sometimes I'd even find them thrown in the trash. For the sake of the baby, I felt I had to avoid divorce at all costs. While part of me wanted to believe that Niall's attitude would change once he saw the baby's face, he started throwing things at me if I defied him even slightly. Seeing him like that, I gradually became unable to resist. As I entered the final month of pregnancy and my due date approached, one day Niall suddenly said in a commanding tone, "We're going to visit the graves now," and started getting ready. "I feel like my stomach has been tightening since this morning, so I'd like to rest at home," I said. "Can't you even go to visit graves? Or are you saying you're not interested in my family's graves?" he retorted. "That's not it at all." "I didn't mean that," I said. Feeling scared by Niall's sharp glare, I couldn't speak up any more forcefully. Unable to defy my husband's orders, I had no choice but to do as he said. So we headed to the remote cemetery in Niall's car in the scorching heat. An awkward silence filled the car, with only the music from the radio echoing emptily. "All right, we're here. Get moving," he said. Dragging my heavy body, we headed towards his family's grave. However, my body was already exhausted, sweat pouring from every pore, and I felt short of breath. The temperature that day was over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and even the mountains, which should have been cool, were stifling and suffocating. If I could just get through this quickly, we could go home. That's when it happened. Ouch! I had felt pain in my stomach even in the car, but now a sharp pain like nothing before shot through me. Surprised by the pain, I crouched down on the spot. Niall must have heard my voice, but he kept walking ahead without paying any attention. I tried to call out to stop him, but only a faint voice came out of my mouth. Niall, please. My stomach hurts. I think I'm in labor. I expected my husband to help me when I said that, but he just stopped and looked at me with a cold face. His eyes showed no trace of love or concern for me. Please. Take me to the hospital right now. Why don't you just give birth here? He said with a smirk, looking down on me. My heart sank to the depths of despair. What? This baby is his child too. I never imagined my husband would act so cruelly. I have things to do after this, so figure it out yourself, he said, forcibly taking my cell phone from my bag. Wait a minute. What are you going to do with that? I asked. It's punishment for using pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework. Reflect on it a bit, he said, smiling faintly as he put my phone in his pocket and got into the car. Please, wait. Don't go. My desperate cries echoed through the mountains as my husband drove away. I was left on the brink of despair, with no way to call for help. As heat haze rose and the sound of insects pierced my ears, I tried to seek help somehow, but my body reached its limit and I lost consciousness. 6 hours later, suddenly a phone rang. What's this? You secretly bought a new phone without telling me. My husband's angry shouts echoed through the hospital room. So, did you give birth? This is the police. Your wife has passed away. Caught off guard by the unexpected person answering the phone, Niall lost his earlier bravado and could only stammer a response. Please come to the hospital immediately. A few minutes later, footsteps approached rapidly down the hallway, and my husband burst into the hospital room. Are you the husband? Who are you? Are you with the police? Niall looked suspiciously at the woman in the room, who was in casual clothes. I'm your wife's friend, Jennifer. I received a call from Taylor asking for help, so I went to the mountain cemetery. She explained the situation to Niall. I rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, we were too late. Jennifer lowered her eyes sadly and bowed deeply in apology. Behind her, on the bed, lay a figure with a white cloth covering their face. Why was my wife, who was in her final month of pregnancy, alone in such a place? I don't know. I couldn't ask her about it. This can't be. What about the baby? I'm afraid the child also. Niall started sniffling, then began to cry, saying in an anguished voice, I can't believe Taylor is gone. Are you sure you have no idea why Taylor was at the cemetery? Jennifer slowly raised her face and asked him with a solemn expression. Of course not. I wasn't told anything, he replied. I see. Then, please look at Taylor's face. The moment she gently removed the white cloth from my face on the bed, I could tell my husband gasped. After staring with wide eyes, frozen like ice for a while, Niall finally managed to squeeze out a voice. No wonder, I was staring at him with my eyes wide open. You're alive. Yes, I am. Thanks to you, the baby was born safely and is doing well. Actually, before losing consciousness, I realized that the phone my husband had taken from me was an old one, so I had called my best friend Jennifer for help. Then I safely gave birth to a baby boy at the hospital. Just as I felt relieved to be saved, anger and sadness over my husband's actions were swirling violently in my chest. So I decided to cooperate with Jennifer. But the police answered the phone earlier. That was Jennifer. We set it all up to trap you after you abandoned me in the mountains. My husband's face twitched for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. I didn't do anything like that. Taylor must just be confused, he said, turning to Jennifer with a smile. I would never do such a thing. I was worried about my wife in her final month and was looking for her. How can you lie so shamelessly? I said. Taylor, you've been through a lot. But I'm so glad you and the baby are safe, Niall said, now taking my hand and acting like a good husband. I shook his hand off with all my might. That's enough. More importantly, there's someone I want you to meet. At that moment, the hospital room door opened again, and a woman entered. Belle. Niall's expression froze instantly, his eyelids twitching with a mixture of surprise and fear. In contrast, the woman called Belle smiled at him with composure. I didn't come here to see you, she said. Huh? What do you mean? He asked. I came to see my sister and her friend Taylor. That statement changed the atmosphere in the room completely. You were cheating on me with Belle, weren't you? When I showed your photo to Jennifer, she said you looked like her sister's boyfriend, so I asked her to call her here. Jennifer, who had been living abroad until recently, didn't know Niall's face well. So when I showed her the photo again, we were surprised by this unexpected development. There's no such evidence. As Niall looked around nervously, trying to cover it up somehow, I thrust Jennifer's phone in front of him. Are you still going to deny it after seeing this photo? It was a lovey-dovey photo of Belle and Niall, and what's more, he wasn't wearing his wedding ring in it. I was shocked when I heard the story from my sister, Belle said. If I had known you were married, I would never have dated you. It's the worst to make me your affair partner, so I decided to cooperate with your wife. Belle, who was also a victim like me, clearly expressed her feelings with tears welling up in her eyes. I'm surprised. To think that the affair partner was my best friend's sister. No. It's not like that. Taylor, you're the only one I love, Niall said, panicking at my accusation. But Belle wasn't going to stay silent either. I'll never forgive you for deceiving me. Belle took out her phone and pressed play. What came out was my husband's voice saying, Belle, I love you. Let's get married. What the hell is this? Why did you record something like that? Niall clenched his fists and his lips trembled. Belle glared at him hatefully. As soon as I heard from my sister, I contacted you to confirm if it was true. Then she played the rest of the recorded audio. It was Niall, getting carried away, saying terrible things like, my wife will be gone soon, and I left my wife in the mountains. I plan to treat it as a missing person case. My husband turned pale and started shaking violently. Too bad your plan to kill me failed, I said. All of you are making a fool of me, he shouted, trying to forcibly take Belle's smartphone, but she smoothly dodged him. You always think you can just take things from others and everything will work out, don't you? She said. This is all nonsense. I've never met this woman before. It must all be made up. My husband yelled, losing his temper despite being in a hospital room. Hospital staff were peeking in from the hallway, but he was too excited to notice. So in your mind, it's all lies. The affair, the recording, abandoning me in the mountains. Shut up. You be quiet. Having his pride deeply wounded by being trapped by me, whom he had looked down on, he seemed to have lost his reason. Audio can be easily fabricated. There's no way that could be evidence. Do you think the dashcam footage isn't evidence either? The moment he heard my statement, Niall froze, his mouth hanging open as he took time to understand the meaning. The car. The dashcam should have recorded everything perfectly. Niall hurriedly turned towards the door, trying to run to the parking lot to hide the evidence, but Belle quickly tripped him, causing him to sprawl ungracefully on the floor. We've already extracted the data, I said. Realizing it was hopeless, my husband turned back to us. The recording earlier was a lie, I told to reassure Belle. I was really planning to go pick you up right away. Please, believe me. He prostrated himself, but there was no way I could believe him now. You didn't contact me for 6 hours. Why did you do this? Then, cornered, Niall started crying profusely. Because I wanted to be free. Having a child just costs money, right? And you started slacking off on housework. Like a small child throwing a tantrum, he kept making excuses while pounding the floor. I was just playing around a bit with Belle. I never seriously intended to marry her. If I got divorced, it would be gossiped about at work and affect my promotion, right? I thoroughly despised my husband, realizing he was a man who only thought about himself. Please, let's start over, he said, still clinging to me even at this point. Does he think he'll be forgiven just by apologizing? It's too late, I answered quietly in a low voice. Niall looked utterly surprised, his face showing an expression of despair. No way. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a hospital security guard entered the room. The staff must have called them because of my husband's commotion. Please, this is just a marital dispute, there's an explanation for this. My husband desperately resisted, but he was dragged out by the large security guard. As silence once again enveloped the hospital room, I unconsciously shed tears of relief, and Jennifer gently rubbed my back. Thus, I was liberated from my past suffering and decided to walk a new path in life. A few months later, my divorce from Niall was finalized. Thanks to the evidence, I was able to stand in an overwhelmingly advantageous position in court. Niall, who received a guilty verdict, is now atoning for his crimes while paying us $30,000 in compensation and child support. With the help of Jennifer and Belle, my son and I are gradually regaining our happy days. My son is growing up healthy, and smiles have returned to our lives. Through this experience, I've decided never to sacrifice myself again, no matter what difficulties may come. Life is full of unpredictable events. Even so, I will carve out my future with my own strength, without entrusting my life to anyone else.